welcome Parag. Is going to talk about the Indian scriptures and then some introduction to the Vedic scriptures. He is from Pune and has plays different music instruments also, and is an IT professional. But he's been interested in Vedas from early on, and he has, with his interest and analysis, he has come up with. This is one of the topics. I'm sure he can talk on many other things. He was just mentioning that he's going to have a session about Ram Raksha in New Jersey at the temple. So, Parag was introduced to Sri Yoga by Vittal, and so I will request Vittal to say a few words about Parag. And let me do one thing with Vittal, that I will spotlight you, and I'll also spotlight Parag.
So, good evening, everybody. Thanks for attending session. First of all, thanks Parag and Sonali means being connected with me. So somehow I feel very lucky that I keep getting connected with very interesting people. And I got introduced to Parag in Parag's wife first in Garze Marathi function in New Jersey, and somehow I have a habit of being in touch with people I meet. And one day we were talking on something else, and I was talking about what we do about yoga, and she said, "Hey, Parag also does this." I thought, "Oh, it's interesting." Then she said he plays tabla also. Then later I came to know Parag teaches tabla and plays a lot of percussion instruments, some string instruments, and I have like a deep passion for tabla. And I also got introduced to Sri Kaka just because of tabla. We were tabla batchmates, and that's how we got introduced. So things are connected somehow. I feel very happy that I'm connected to Prague, and then thought, okay, then I realized you have good knowledge of whole spirituality that we all are interested in. Yoga is connected to spirituality. Parag is a author of two books, Creation of the Universe and Sacred Scrolls. And he's going to talk about Vedic knowledge system. I think I think have heard Vedic word a lot of time, but doesn't know anything more than that Vedic word. So I am also curious, and so we all are. So over to you, Parag. Continue.
Thank you. Thank you for that wonderful introduction and kind words. And Sri Kaka, thank you for organizing this event and the entire initiative. Yesterday, we had a great time with all of you. It was great meeting all of you in person. So with that, I'll get started. It is great to have all of you on this session today. Today, we are going to talk a little bit about roots of our knowledge system, also called as Vedic knowledge system. And there are a lot of topics that we can talk, and I don't claim to be an expert in every Veda or any Veda for that matter. But I have done enough study to understand the basics and fundamentals, and that is what I plan to present to you today. As a matter of fact, I don't think any wise person would claim to be expert in Veda. It is such a vast topic, but we will understand some basics, some fundamentals, some ideas about what the Vedas are, what the knowledge system is, where our roots are. And as a matter of fact, we all are connected here through Sri Kaka, through the medium of yoga. And yoga roots are, they trace back to Vedic knowledge as well. We'll talk a little bit about it in a minute. But it's kind of, there is a great relevance between yoga and Veda. I'll try to say yoga instead of yoga, and Veda instead of Veda, because I believe that is the right pronunciation. Just to set the context, uh, the actions that we perform, the exercises that we perform under name of yoga, those are called yoga. And a person, a male who performs those actions is called yogi, and a woman who performs those exercises is called yoga. So when we say yoga, it is not the actual exercise, but it is a female person who is performing those exercises. Anyway, uh, so with that background, I'll share my screen, and we'll get started. Just to keep the flow going, we will keep the questions and answers towards the end. Feel free to type those questions in the chat box, but if I do look at the questions, and if those are very relevant or specific to the context, I will address a few of those, but definitely we will address most of the questions towards the end. Today's discussion, primarily the content is from this book. It is called Sacred Scrolls, an introduction to Vedic knowledge system. And this book is available in India as well as here in US and most other countries on Amazon. So I'm sure today's discussion, you'll find it very interesting and provoking. So as a follow-up or as a additional information or a reference material, you can consider going through this book. And of course, I'll share my contact details, and you feel free to write to me if you have any questions, suggestions, some information for me. I'll be more than happy to interact with all of you. So as Vithalji said, we have heard of Veda, we have heard of Vedic system, we have heard of Vedic something, Vedic samvidhi, and so on. But very few of us really know what even the word Veda means. We typically think Ved is something to do with our scriptures, something to do with our religion, and the only person who should know or who needs to know is the priest or the pandit who comes to our home for some puja or some rituals. Um, and he comes and he does some chanting, he does his stuff, he goes away, and we eat food. That's as much as we know about Veda, unfortunately. And not all of us, but some of us. But really speaking, yes, Vedas are foundations for our religious principles, our religious background, or our religion in general. And what we follow is not really a religion, it is a dharma. And there is a huge difference between dharma and religion. We will not go into those details. But our reference books are, or our reference text or scriptures are called Veda. The word Veda comes from root word Vid. As many of you know, most of the Sanskrit words come from some root verb, root dhatu or verb. So in case of Veda, it comes from the root word vid, and vid means to know, and Veda means knowledge. So it is so fascinating that the books that we think are our religious books or our scriptures or dharma grantha or whatever you call it, those are not really religious books, but those are actually books filled with knowledge. And we'll see a little bit about what knowledge it has and so on and so forth. Again, at a high level, some of us know that there are four Veds: Rigved, Yajurved, Samaved, and Atharvaved or Atharvana Ved. And we'll see a little bit about the structure, how those four Veds came about and what they discuss, what they talk about, and so on and so forth. One interesting thing in any context, when you talk about a book, people ask who is the author of that book. So even in case of Vedam, you will hear that question, and we're going to understand who the authors are. So we believe that Veda are apaurushaya. That means those are not human made or written or created or composed by humans. Now, how is that possible? If there is a text, somebody has written it. And if somebody has written it, that person, whoever wrote that, is the creator of that text. So, how can I say it is not man made or a Paurusheya? So, there are two aspects to it. One aspect is the sages, the rishis, who revealed these mantras in Veda, they proclaim that it's not my composition. I was in my meditation, and during my meditation, I heard these sounds. I heard this mantra, and I just reproduced those. So, whatever I have reproduced, it is not my creation, it is somebody else's creation. And that somebody else, again, you can call it God or Ishwar or Paramatma, Parmeshwar, whatever name you call it, right? So, it is his creation. He revealed it through me. So, I'm just a medium. So, they did not take any credit for that work. And that is why they did not say that I have written this. So that is why it is not written by them or created by them. It is just revealed through them. And that is why all these texts are called Apaurusheya. Okay. Now, many sections in many Veda do talk about the Rishi who revealed those mantras or group of mantras. And those are called Drashta Rishi for that section or for that mantra. It is interesting that they call it Drashta or the seer. They saw those mantras in meditative state. So that is why they are called Drashta. And in reality, they say that they heard those mantras, and because of that, they heard through their ears. So they are also called Shruti. Whatever they heard, whatever these mantras are, those are also called Shruti. Now, when you talk about any Veda, the Veda is not written by one person. Typically, we have understanding that Maharshi Vyas wrote all the Vedas. Yeah, if you look at it from the written form perspective, then yes, Maharshi Vyas documented those. But that's not, he's not the author or creator of Veda. The Veda, any Veda, if you look at, if you say Rigveda, you look at Yajurveda, Samaveda, whatever. So every Veda has different sections written by different rishis. So a Veda is not written by one or revealed through one rishi. It is collection of rishis. They heard different parts and they put those together in a specific Veda. And as I just now said, they heard those, and since it is heard knowledge, it is called Shruti knowledge or Shruti Grantha. Okay. And as I just mentioned, at some point, Maharshi Vyas realized that these Veda need to be documented. Till then, Veda were not documented. We had a oral tradition. So the teachers used to orally teach everything to their disciples. And their disciples used to memorize every single thing. And obviously, then they used to do their own contemplation, understanding, and so on and so forth. But those were not in written format, those were never written. That does not mean there was no knowledge of script. There was a knowledge of scripts, languages and scripts were invented. But to maintain the purity and to maintain the context and to make sure that the right knowledge is given to right person, only to qualified person, who is qualified or mature enough to understand and handle that knowledge, only to that person that knowledge was given. And that's why the oral tradition was followed instead of written tradition. Okay. Now, you might know that in Western countries, a person who is well educated, we call it he is a well read person. In our tradition, we call it he's a Bahushruta. Bahushruta is a word we use for a knowledgeable person. And that again, the roots go to this oral knowledge sharing or oral traditions of teaching and education. Okay. So at some point, Maharshi Vyas realized that through generations, this knowledge is passing from generation to generation, rishi to disciple, disciple to next disciple, and so on. But in that process, somewhere that knowledge is either getting diluted, or there is a possibility that there is some knowledge might become extinct, because some rishis may not get enough disciples. Their ashram might go out of business, so to say, right, or close down. So what will happen to that knowledge? He realized that potential challenge, and he took a huge job of compiling all the Veda in documented format. And there is actually a story that he went to different rishis, different sages who were practicing different Veda, and learned everything from them and then documented it. And that is why Maharshi Vyasa, you also hear sometimes he is called as Veda Vyasa, because his work was so phenomenal that he, with lot of respect, people started calling him Veda Vyasa. Now, Veda Vyasa also realized that he was extremely dedicated, committed, super talented. So he realized that I could grasp knowledge of all four Veda, but that does not mean that every disciple of mine or the future generations, a single person will have capabilities, abilities, maturities to learn all four Veda. So he decided to hand over knowledge or tradition of one Veda to one of his disciples. So four disciples, he distributed four Veda. And when we say distributed four Veda, the knowledge from those Veda. And then they started further practicing and teaching their disciples the knowledge system or the heritage of that respective Veda. So he gave Rigveda to Maharshi Paila. He gave Yajurveda to Maharshi Vaishampayan. He gave Samaveda to Maharshi Jaimini and Atharva Veda to Sumantu. And then those four sages further kept the tradition alive and kept on teaching that knowledge to their disciples. One other important aspect behind the oral tradition is the pronunciation. When we say something is a mantra, there is a very specific way in which it needs to be chanted. So, what we hear on YouTube or other places where people are singing Gayatri Mantra or singing Rudra or any other mantras or compositions, that is wrong. That is not acceptable, and rather it can have adverse effects. So the mantra is not a shloka. Shloka is different and mantra is different. Shlok, yes, you can sing, you can chant in whichever way you want, as long as you're maintaining right pronunciation. But in mantra, it needs to be recited or chanted in exactly specific manner in which the seers or the drashta rishis heard it. So the intonation, the tone of different words, some are like high pitch, some are low pitch, and so on and so forth. So all those practices need to be followed when we are chanting a mantra. And obviously, we cannot really write the tone, right? We can write the word, but we cannot write the tone. So that is why the oral tradition was also very important. And even today, it is important. If you go to any Veda Pathashala or Vedic schools, they still follow oral tradition. Of course, they have all the texts in written format, but for teaching, they always go with oral tradition. And you might have seen some pandits or some schools, you might have seen videos. When they chant, they move their hand up and down. So when they move their hand up, that is when they say those words in higher pitch, higher tone. And when they move their hand down, it is in lower tone, and so on and so forth. So to that level, they follow the precision. And it is so fascinating that if you invite a real knowledgeable Vedic expert from any part of world, they all will chant certain mantra in exactly same manner. Of course, there are different ways based on different Vedic tradition they follow. But if you invite two rishis or two pandits who are from Rigvedic tradition, from any part of the country, any part of the world, they will chant certain mantra in exactly same way. Now, Samaveda person will chant little differently. Okay, there are different ways depending on the Vedic tradition you follow. But it is not random. It is not that randomly they will, put some tune and start singing and things like that. So they preserve that knowledge and the heritage by right pronunciation, right intonation, right punctuations, so on and so forth. And that is why it is very, very important. One important aspect I'll mention here is the reason these intonations are important are the way we chant certain mantra, or we say any letter for that matter, any word we pronounce, it creates vibrations. And those vibrations have effects. And if we want to get same effect or a specific effect by reciting certain mantra, then those vibrations need to be tuned with the result that we are expecting. And that is why to create those kind of vibrations, it is important to chant it in very specific manner and not randomly and not sing it in some different tune. We'll see a kind of a chart in next slide, but the overall knowledge that we have in our tradition, it is divided into two parts. One is called Shruti and one is called Smriti. And we just talked about Shruti. Shruti is basically all the Veda, four Veda. They are called Shruti Grantha. That is the knowledge, that is the information, that is the mantras that Drashta Rishis heard and then revealed. Whereas once that information was available, obviously a lot of other rishis made some emphasis or wrote some additional commentaries, additional books, additional information, additional narrations based on that knowledge. And all those additional knowledge or additional commentaries are definitely man made. And all such knowledge aspects are called Smriti. Smriti is somebody remembered the Shruti and then made their own commentaries. So that is why it is called Smriti Grantha. And when we say Smriti, we only think of Manusmriti, but that is not the case. Any knowledge that is not part of Veda itself, directly from the Ved, it is called Smriti. And Smriti Grantha is again another part of Smriti. And we know, we have heard of something called Manusmriti, and we have all misunderstanding about Manusmriti. But there are a lot of other Smritis. There is a Parashar Smriti, there is Yajnavalkya Smriti, and so on and so forth. There are a lot of Smriti Grantha available. Okay, but these Smriti Granthas are additional elaboration, not just elaboration, but people adding their own commentaries, their own explanations, their own perspectives to the original Vedic knowledge. So some of us are from IT background. So if you want to compare, and again, I'll just take a random example. Let's say you're studying Java, you take Java manual. The Java manual will only have what commands are supported in Java, what structure, what formats, all that information will be there. But with that, nobody can really learn Java. Then you have to buy a book where the application is explained. How do you use certain command? How do you use certain structures, certain flows and loops and so on and so forth. So that is kind of a rough analogy of what the core knowledge is and what's the elaborated knowledge is. So this is the chart I just mentioned. So on the Shruti side, there are four Veda. And again, each Veda is further divided into four parts. Okay, so there is Sanhita, Brahman, Aranyak, and Upanishad. And we'll see a little bit details in a minute. And then on the other side, there are Smriti Granthas. Smriti Grantha again, this structure that you see on the screen, there are different views, different people's break it in different fashion, but at a large scale, this is the how the division is. So all the itihasa, we have two itihas granthas, Ramayana and Mahabharata. Okay, those are not mythologies, those are not stories, those are called itihasa. And itihasa means, the word itself means this is exactly how it happened. So those are kind of more evidence-based and reality-based books. Then there are Puranas. Purana are more story-based elaborations of Vedic principles. So it's very difficult sometimes to relate to Purana stories. We think, oh, those are all fictional stories. Those are not really fictional stories. I mean, really from the story perspective, it might be fictional, but it is designed in such a way that it is teaching us something from core Vedic knowledge system. So there are Puranas, there are Dharma Shastras, there are Sutra Grantha, there is Vedanga, Upaveda, all these things, they fall under Smriti. Now, some people say that Vedanga and Upavedas, they are part of Shruti. Some people say they are part of Smriti. So there is again, experts might have some different perspectives or views, and we'll not go into that battle. We'll just try to understand the core concepts. Okay. Even on Shruti side, we'll see in the next slide that when you talk about a Veda, Veda has 4 parts, and different experts have different opinions about how those 4 parts are supposed to be assumed or supposed to be interpreted, and we'll discuss that in a bit. But our dharma, what we call it as Sanatana Dharma, or lately we call it as Hindu Dharma, all our dharma principles are based on what is written in Veda. The word dharma really doesn't mean religion. It means the something that upholds you, something that is your core value, your core principle. That is called dharma. And there are a lot of texts that you call it as, my religious books, and Bhagavad Gita can be a great example. But again, Bhagavad Gita knowledge, if you trace the roots, it goes back to Kathopanishad and it goes back to Veda, right? So there are everything, if you trace back, it goes back to Vedic knowledge. And there is a clear mention that if we ever find a conflict or a contradiction between what is written in Veda versus any other text, and in a general category, any other text means Smriti. So if there is a contradiction, then whatever is written in Veda should be treated as a standard. That should be treated as a pramana. So the actual statement is Shruti Smriti Virodhetu Shrutireva Gariyasi. So that is very clearly written. So if there is a conflict or a contradiction, or if your interpretations of texts are different, then whatever is written in Veda, that is the standard. Okay? And Veda are only authoritative texts, and all other are derived from Veda. Again, as I said, different people, their interpretations, elaborations, or the way they wanted to teach something which is in the Veda, so they built some additional mechanisms of delivering that training, so on and so forth. But the core root texts are Veda. Another confusion we have, and again we get sometimes called out on that. Hey, you have so many gods. How can you have so many gods, right? So if you look at the Vedic era, most of the gods that we worship today did not exist in Vedic era, and most of those gods are not even mentioned anywhere in the Veda, and that actually includes Bhagwan Shiv, Bhagwan Vishnu, Bhagwan Brahma, Bhagwan Ram, Krishna, Devi, whatever you think of. So our core principles, the deities, our devatas, are all nature. So rain is a god, sun is a god, and all these are aspects of nature. Right? The wind is a god, fire is a god. so on and so forth. So all the elements that are available in the nature and which are essential for our survival, or even things like storms and other things which are harmful for us, all of those are gods. So we either pray to them to invoke them and seek their blessings, or we pray to them, stay away from me. Right? So if you look storm, for example, or flood, I don't want it, stay away from me. So I'm praying you, be happy with my prayers. I'm giving you some offerings, take my offerings and go away. So all these deities that we see in the Vedic era, those are all typically all the natural forces. And also there are certain aspects of emotions within us. Those are also treated as gods in many texts. So for example, love, the kama, the mana, shraddha, all these are also treated as gods in different texts. And some other devatas include, again, certain specific aspects, and we'll probably not get time to go into the depth of that, but Yaksha, Gandharva, Apsara, and so on and so forth, which are in today's description, they are called as celestial beings. Those were also treated as certain aspects were treated as deities. After that, humans who had extreme knowledge, commitment, who invented something for humanity or who protected humanity, who were extremely strong, so on and so forth, they were treated as deities. They were treated as gods. And all the aspects of Brahma, Vishnu, and Mahesh, what we see today is personification of certain powers or certain energies. And that is a very unique aspect of our religion, that we personify everything. Anything, any description we see, we personify that. Right? We try to draw a picture of a human figure with those attributes or with those qualities. And it helps in most common people, it helps to visualize something and to believe in something. If I say everything is not visible, then it's very difficult for me as a common person to believe in something that I can't see, that I can't experience, right? So that is the reason we started personifying everything. So we personified Vishnu, we personified Shiva, we personified Brahma, we personified pretty much everything. We personified energy into form of goddess, and then I can see it in a visual form. Then it is easy for me. Oh, okay, that's the person I'm worshipping or believing in. So that is how this personification started, and those personifications are important. They started with a specific intent, but then they also got polluted over years, and people started, literally, for lack of better words, fantasizing and creating some weird personifications, or some impractical personifications and so on. And then that leads to more questions. How can this happen? How can somebody have 6 hands and 10 hands and 100 heads and whatever, right? But we'll get into that a little bit later. Now, everything in nature is a god or a devata or a deity. The reason again to treat nature as a god was twofold. One is identify techniques or mechanics by which we can control certain aspects of nature, certain aspects, not everything. And secondly, to create a respect about the nature so we will not destroy the nature, to maintain the harmony. So those are two intents in the way I understood why we started treating nature or natural forces as deities or gods. And there are mantras, those are created, and even today the people exist who can actually chant mantra in very pure format and invoke certain natural energies. And of course, they are not going to do that as a show off thing. Okay, come, I'll show you how I can invoke rain. No, they don't do that because they know that they have the maturity of using that knowledge. Because when you invoke rain, for example, something else gets unbalanced, right? If I invoke fire, something else will get unbalanced, and so on. So they understand that aspect. They are mature enough to know when to use the energy that they have or the knowledge they have. And that is why that knowledge is not made very public, uh, because a person who does not have maturity of using that knowledge can use it in inappropriate manner. Now, again, we say that Veda is knowledge. Then what kind of knowledge is there? We'll see a little bit details as we go further. But pretty much anything you can think of. You talk about astronomy, yes, it is there. You talk about social science, it is there. Agriculture, it is there. Architecture, it is there. Metallurgy is there. Material science is there. Medicine is there. Warfare is there. Anything that you can think of, the knowledge is there. And rather, we believe that the knowledge that existed back then was far more superior than the knowledge that we have today. Far, far superior. Even with all the computer inventions and all that, the knowledge that we had was far superior. And there are so many examples of that mechanism or that knowledge. Unfortunately, the exact mechanism of acquiring that knowledge or applying that knowledge has, it's lost. Sad but true. And that's why sometimes we think, oh, it is just a fantasy. It never existed. No, there are very specific references in very specific context, which cannot be just a fantasy. So if we study it in depth, we will understand that the knowledge did exist. This is one important slide, how the Vedic knowledge structure is organized. So when we talk about a general word Veda, the Veda itself is, as we learn, is divided into 4 parts or 4 Veda. The first is Rig Veda, and each Ved has its own Sanhita, Brahmanas, Brahman Grantha. This Brahman is not the Varna, this is the Grantha. Then the next is Aranyaka, and then is Upanishad. Sanhita is the actual text, actual mantra that seers heard. That is the only part that they really heard. And this Brahman gives some additional commentaries about application of those mantra. So if you want to use some mantra to invoke certain things or to perform some yajna, exactly how to use that mantra, how to arrange that yajna, all that elaboration and details are provided in Brahman Grantha. Aranyaka are more of contemplations. So as the word indicates, Aranya is a forest. So these are created in Aranya or in forest. So those are called Aranyaka. So these sages went in isolation, contemplated upon those mantras or Veda, and came up with additional explanations. Those are there in Aranyaka. And last part is Upanishad. Upanishad is explanation of Vedic knowledge in dialogue format. So most Upanishads are dialogues between Guru and Shishya, or teacher and student, or two teachers or two gurus, two rishis. But it is most of, not all, but most Upanishads are in dialogue format, where they're discussing some super intense, super difficult topic and helping the other person to understand it in easier format. So that is Upanishad. Now again, as I said, there are some people who say that only Sanhita is Shruti, everything else is Smriti. But the general belief is all these 4 components put together forms a Veda. So all these are treated as Shruti. Now each Veda has its own Sanhita, its own Brahman, its own Aranyak, its own Upanishad, and not one, multiple. Right? So if you look at Rig Veda, there is a Shakal and Bashkal Sanhitas available, and Aitareya Aranyak available, and it has Aitarek, Bashkal, and Kaushitaki Upanishads. And then there are similar Brahman Granthas. So again, I won't read through this entire chart. We'll share, or you can take a screenshot or look at it later and understand. One interesting point I will mention, that Rigved, there is only one Rigved, only one Samved, one Atharvaved. But in Yajurved, there are two branches. One is called Krishna, one is called Shukla. Now, technically, when you try to do English translation, you call it black Yajurved and white Yajurved, but that is not really a right mechanism or right way to address those. But these are two branches, and again, there is a big story about how those two came into existence and why one is called Krishna, one is called Shukla. We will not go into those details in the interest of time. During question answer, if the time permits, we will address those. But this is a general structure of Vedic knowledge system, or the Shruti part of it. Veda divided into four Veda, and each Veda has its own Samhita, its own Brahman Granthas, its own Aranyaks and Upanishads. And we must have heard of lot of Upanishads, or at least names of lot of Upanishads. Bhagavad Gita is said to be an Upanishad. In fact, if you have read Bhagavad Gita, at the end of every chapter, we say Srimad Bhagavad Gita Su Upanishadsu. And at the end of Bhagavad Gita, Ityupanishada, the reference comes. So Bhagavad Gita is also treated as a Upanishad. But again, there are different Upanishads for each of the Vedas. Then there are different rishis, different sages who have acquired knowledge or expertise in specific Veda. The person who has acquired the knowledge and uses that knowledge for performing yajna is called Ritvik. So the Ritvik Roshan that we call, he probably doesn't know anything about any of a Veda, but the Ritvik is the sage or the rishi who has acquired knowledge of specific Veda, and he knows how to apply that to invoke or to perform yajna. That person, that rishi is called Ritvik. And again, based on four Veda, there are different names for those Ritviks. The Ritvik who is expert in Rigveda, he is called Hota. The person who is expert in Yajurveda, he is called Adhvaryu. Samaveda is Udgata. Samaveda is all about songs. All the mantras are sung in very specific format, and these Ritviks, they sing it out very loud during the yajna. So Udgata, singing in loud voice. So that is why they are called Udgata. And the most important is Brahma. He is a Ritvik for Atharva Veda. And Brahma is supposed to have knowledge of all four Veda. So he's kind of a supervisor. He will keep an eye on what is going on. Is everybody doing things properly? So he's like a supervisor, that person, but he is authority on Atharva Veda, and he is called Brahma. We'll quickly touch upon Brahman Grantha further elaborates that there is a mantra in Veda, how to use that, how to apply that during yajna, how to use it. So all those mechanics and details are given in Brahman Grantha. Again, this is just a list of different Brahmans that are available today. There are mentions of having lot more Brahmins in different Veda, but only these are available today. Unfortunately, a huge amount of knowledge is lost over ages and with invasions and other things that happened. Aranyaka, we talked about it, is contemplations done in isolation to bring out the philosophy of certain Vedic knowledge. And Upanishad, we talked about it in the dialogue form to explain the knowledge in more simpler manner. And these are some primary Upanishads. Of course, there are a lot more, but these are assumed to be primary Upanishads for respective Veda. So if you see any familiar name, now you know which Veda it is associated with. Okay. Bhagavad Gita is primarily based on Kathopanishad, and Katha Upanishad, it is part of Krishna Yajurveda. And other, if you know Upanishad names, you can check which Veda it follows and which knowledge it follows. Okay, then we'll quickly touch upon Upaveda. Now, Upaveda is very practical aspect of Vedic knowledge. We say, okay, Veda has all this knowledge. It has knowledge about architecture and warfare and medicine and this and that. Now, if I want to study only warfare, for example, now I have to go through different Veda, different sections. So the Rishi has decided they will extract relevant knowledge and form a subsection or Upaveda. Now, mostly the yoga that we do, it comes or it is related to Ayurveda. And Ayurveda is, again, we all know, it is more about medicine and surgeries and treatments and medicinal properties and lifestyle. It is not about only medicine, importantly, it is about overall lifestyle. All those recommendations, advices, guidelines, they are there in Ayurveda, and that comes from Rigveda, but some believe, and the Sushrit Samhita says that it comes from Atharva Veda or predominantly from Atharva Veda. So again, it is either Rigveda or Atharva Veda or combination. Then there is one Veda called Dhanur Veda. Dhanur Veda is all about warfare, different weapons, how to fight, how to strategize the war, which weapon to use when, how to invoke different weapons, how to, for example, bombs and shastra and astra. And then what are the different types of shastra, what are the different types of astra, how to invoke those, how to recall those, how to call those back. All that knowledge is available in Dhanur Veda. And Dhanur Veda is primarily based on Yajur Veda. Then next is Gandharva Veda, which is more about dance and music. And as I said, most of the mantra in Sama Veda are sung. So the sing or the music knowledge is there in Sama Veda, and music-oriented aspects are extracted into Gandharva Veda. And then Atharva Veda, there is a lot of knowledge about architecture, and that is extracted into a separate Upaveda called Shilpa Veda or Sthapatya Veda, the Sthapatya Shastra that we call it today. So all these Vastu and all these aspects, they come into Shilpa Veda or Sthapatya Veda. The important thing is, it is not just about a building. It's not about just about Vastu, but the Shilpa Veda or Sthapatya Veda, it talks about the entire city planning and the water supply and the sewage and roads and traffic and every aspect of city planning. And one aspect of city planning is actually building a building. So all those aspects are described in Shilpa Veda or Sthapatya Veda. Extremely comprehensive and very, very powerful knowledge, which is, and all of these actually is very, very applicable even today. But except Ayurveda and little bit about Vastu, we don't use much of this knowledge today. Yoga we talked about in the beginning. And then we'll stop after this and open up for questions. There is something called Vedanga. Now, Vedanga is not part of Veda, but it gives you some additional information about the language and the structure and the construct of Veda or any text for that matter. So there are 6 Vedangas. The first Vedanga is called Shiksha. So Shiksha talks about phonetics, right way of pronouncing certain alphabets, and so on. So all this knowledge about pronunciation and phonetics, it comes in Shiksha Grantha. The next is Chanda. Chanda is the poetic construct or the meter in which certain mantra or certain shlok can be composed in. Or in Marathi or some other languages, if you have heard of Chanda. So Chanda, Vritta. Vritta is also different way, but similar to Chanda. So Chanda dictates how many syllables should be there in one line or 2 lines or in overall mantra and so on. So that is a physical construct of mantra. Vyakaran, we know Vyakaran is all the language related aspects, the grammar, and so on. Nirukta is etymology. So if you take any word and if you want to trace where this word came from, so the root, the etymological meaning and the explanation on the context. So we say Veda came from Vid, but that kind of explanation is available in Nirukta. Then Kalpa is more about rituals, how to perform certain rituals and what will happen if you perform certain rituals. That kind of information is there in Kalpa. And when we perform different pujas, in the Sankalpa, we said Kalpokta Phala Praptyartham. So to get the returns, to get the results, to get the fruits as described in the Kalpa. That's what we say in a lot of puja, right? So all those aspects are described in Kalpa. And the last one is Jyotisha. Now, Jyotisha, typically when we think of Jyotisha, we think about astrology, whereas Jyotisha is more about astronomy and little bit about astrology. Or Phala Jyotisha is different part of Jyotisha, but it is more about astronomy. So it is all about the solar systems and galaxies and the universe and all those aspects related to the overall universe. Those are discussed and described in Jyotisha. Jyotisha was extremely important in timekeeping. So today, we say that okay, today is such and such day, date, month, and so on. But that day, date, and month can occur every year. That year can occur every 10 years or every 100 years or 1,000 years and so on. Whereas the Jyotish references, the astronomical references, the combinations of solar, or not just solar, but all the planetary positions are very, very unique. And a lot of people do research based on the planetary positions mentioned in certain text to do the back calculation on when that event must have happened. So even in Mahabharata, there are references. Mahabharata nowhere clearly says, oh, Mahabharata happened on such and such date. But there are references that when Mahabharata war started, this is where the planetary position was. And that kind of planetary position combination could exist only on one day in the entire lifetime. And people take that reference and do back calculation to do the dating of certain historic events. So it is astronomy as well as timekeeping. Itihasa we talked about, it's not a myth. Purana we talked briefly. I think we'll, in the interest of time, we'll stop here and open up for questions. But as Kaka mentioned in the beginning, these are two books I have written. Both are available on YouTube, Amazon. This first book, it talks about Purusha Sukta and the scientific explanation or decoding of Purusha Sukta. And the second one is pretty much more elaboration on the topics that we just discussed. So with that, I'll pause here and let's see what questions we have. And if based on questions, we can refer to some slides again and go back. So the first question is a woman performing is yoga or yogini? Both are the names for a woman performing.
Parag, can you stop the screen share so
Oh,
that you can have the. Okay, yeah, okay, thank you.
so both are the words for a woman performing yoga, yoga or yogini. What do we need Vedic knowledge? Why not what? Uh, okay, why do we need to know Vedic knowledge? As we said, there are so many topics that are even uncovered today, right? I mean, I'll take Ayurveda as one of the examples. Why do we need Ayurvedic knowledge? Because it is so non-invasive and with like we call it, no side effects, natural remedies, so on and so forth. So we need that knowledge to live a better life. And same applies for other branches also. We need Sthapatya to do effective architecture, effective town planning, effective city planning, so on and so forth. So all the knowledge is very, very applied. It is not just a theoretical knowledge. Darshana fits into, and I think the chart that we show, the Darshana was mentioned. but Darshana fits into Smriti Granthas. How old are Veda? Again, there are different, as I said, most of the people have done astronomical, taken astronomical references to do the dating. And astronomical is not the only way. There are linguistic, there are social, there are like rivers and whole lot of different references people take and try to do the dating. But the dating goes as back as 20,000 BCE, based on the research that Dr. P.V. Vartak has done. And if you see any books or videos from Nilesh Oak, he has also uh, elaborated on that. But again, there is no direct mention dating anywhere. So it is all about how you study and what you uncover. So different people have come up with different dates. But again, all of those are several thousand years ago. Sankhya is a philosophy. So next question is Sankhya considered as yoga? So Sankhya is a philosophy. It is not a mechanism or the guidelines for the actual yoga. To my knowledge, again, the topic is so vast, and there can be different interpretations, different information available in different sources.
Well,
So
I thought you said that Ayurveda is the source of yoga, and that doesn't really, you know,
correct. So it
it doesn't.
correct. So if you trace it back, most people trace it back to either Atharva Veda or Rig Veda. And Ayurveda also traces back to those two.
Okay.
Where can we learn authentic pronunciations? Um, it's a interesting question. Of course, you can look for some YouTube videos. The right way is to find a guru, find a teacher. But again, with this today's era, you can look for. The challenge is, if you look for a YouTube video that teaches you how to chant Gayatri Mantra, you will find 100 different videos teaching you 20 different techniques. Now, you cannot say one is right, one is wrong. So again, beyond the point, you have to follow your own guru tradition, or whoever you believe in, and ask them and take their guidance and their advice. The important thing to understand is we should not, of course, Gayatri Mantra you can chant every day, for 10 times, 11 times, 21 times. That is different. Milinji, I'll come to you in a minute. But if you are doing sadhana of certain mantra, then we need to make sure that we have taken Diksha. We have taken proper knowledge of that mantra, proper knowledge of the pronunciation, because otherwise it can cause serious harmful effects on our body. So it is very important to take Diksha and understand uh, how many times I should chant, when I should chant, what is the right way to chant, so on and so forth. Sorry, Milinji, you had a question?
Um, yeah, but before that, I was just wanting to mention there are some like still some gurukulams in India which are still actively being run. So
Yes.
there may be some classes available to chant like how to chant these mantras. I'm not sure, but uh, because like one of the I learned Valmiki Ramayana from one of the student who is like just 22 years old, and after and he was like born in US, and after his schooling here, he went to India somewhere, some Gurukulam near Madras, and he learned like for several years, like he learned Valmiki Ramayana, and the way he chant that, like I can make out. But that is where, like he was like first taught like how to chant these lokas.
Right. So the important thing to understand is Valmiki Ramayana is not a Veda. It is a Smriti Grantha. Okay. So as long as you are doing right pronunciation, you can chant whichever way you want. Most of the Valmiki Ramayana is in Anushtup Chanda. Most of Bhagavad Gita is in, or most of the texts are in Anushtup Chanda. So as long as you follow the rules of Anushtup Chanda, you can chant. And as I said, it is not a mantra, those are shloka. So pronunciation is important, but the manner of chanting, intonation, and those things are not applicable. But yes, if you want to read any Sanskrit text for that matter, yes, if you know the chanda, it is very easy to read text which is in that chanda.
And one more question, like the question I had was, so if we want to learn, like let's say Rigveda today, are the resources available, and in which language those those texts are?
So now the resources are available in pretty much every language. Um, there is a text from Satawalekar Guruji, which is about in Marathi. Then Chitrao Shastri books are available in Marathi. And again, different language, I'm sure there are, or rather, there are a lot of books available.
I see. Okay. Thank you. Very informative session, Paragji.
Thank you. And I know it was more theoretical, but I hope I was able to establish some context about our roots of our knowledge system.
Can I ask a question about Samveda?
Sure.
So, what is the specific? Is there any specific use of Samveda when it is used or chanted, or?
Yes, so Samaveda, let me share my screen again. So I think I hid one slide, but that's okay. So when we perform the yajna, the primary intent of Samaveda is to um, please the gods or please everybody. So that's why they used to sing those mantra in literally in singing format, in the singing manner. So it was more about praising and pleasing. Oh, I think it kind of briefly says it here. Now, other interesting thing to understand is again, different people have different opinions, so uh, it's not a very hard rule as such. But whatever you find in Rigveda, I would say 70% of that is there in other Veda. So all other Vedas are further elaborations or further specific aspects of what is there in Rigveda in specific context. So you will see that pretty much 70% of Rigveda is there in Yajurveda as well as in Samaveda.
I have another question. So, what are these Gandharva, the Devatas, and what is there any role or function they have a specific?
Yes, that is a little tricky question, and I would honestly tell you, I, I cannot answer it very precisely or very authoritatively rather. So those were treated as celestial beings with some specific knowledge of either medicine or some dance or things like that. So those were treated as deities for that aspect.
No, then when we talk about pleasing God, I mean, there must be some effect that they have on us.
Right. So, okay, so there are two different aspects, right, of God that we talked about. One is the natural forces, and the other one is emotions and things like that. And later on, it was also human beings. But the primary function of Rigveda mantra was to activate certain energies in the nature. So when you say please that God, basically, when you say I'm pleasing rain, that means I'm chanting certain mantra that will create vibrations that will cause it to rain. That is what I mean, or what it means when I say I'm pleasing rain.
Okay, so it will bring that effect.
Right.
Okay.
I have a
Uh,
question, if I may.
One second. There is a question in the chat about Shukla and Krishna difference. Okay. So we talked about Maharshi Vyas distributed 4 Veds to 4 of his disciples, and he assigned Yajurved to Vaishampayan. Vaishampayan had his nephew, but more importantly, his most beloved disciple called Yajnavalkya. And you hear Yajnavalkya reference in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad also, same Yajnavalkya. And he was the best student. Uh, he was there for sage Vaishampayan. At one point, there was a huge argument between Guru Shishya. And it went to an extreme where Vaishampayan said, "You are no longer my disciple, you are no longer my student. Give all my knowledge back to me." So, in literal translation, he said, "Vomit everything back to me." Now, I'll switch to Marathi just for a second. When somebody goes and badmouths you to somebody else, we say, "Tithe jaun काय ओकलास?" Right? So that vomiting does not mean physically throw up. But same way, Vaishampayan said, "Okay, vomit everything back to me." Now, that means you repeat everything back, give it back. And if you're giving back, I already have knowledge. Why would you give it back to me? So he called other rishi. His name was Tittari. And he said, "Okay, now you teach everything to Tittari. I have spent so much time and energy on you. Now you spend that and teach the next person. And then forget everything that I have told you, I have taught you." So Yajnavalkya taught everything back to Tittari. Now, obviously, when Sri Kaka teaches us something, that is the pure form. If I teach it back to somebody else, I might miss out something, I might teach it in my own way, I might make some variations. So it may not be as pure as what Kaka taught me. Right? So that knowledge which Yajnavalkya gave back to Tittari was called as Krishna, which means black or dark, or maybe with some variations. I should not say impurities, but some variations, some differences, some deviations from the original. That is why it was called Krishna Yajurveda. And then Yajnavalkya said, "But I want to have that knowledge." So he did Suryopasana, and Surya. Now again, I know somebody will ask me next question, but I'll come to that. So Surya gave him Drishtanta. Surya came in the form of horse. Horse is also called Vajina, and taught him everything to Yajnavalkya. So that Sanhita which he learned is again purest because it came straight from sun, but it came through a Vajin, through horse. So it is called Vajasani Sanhita. And that is called Shukla Yajurved or pure Yajurved. And the one that he gave to Titari is called Krishna Yajurved. Now, there is also, since the people sometimes take the literal meanings, they say, "Okay, so Yajnavalkya threw up that knowledge, threw up, and somebody ate that, his throw up." So there were birds sitting on the tree, there were Tittari birds who ate that and they became knowledgeable. So those kind of stories come. But in my reading and my understanding, it is another sage, another rishi called Tittari, who got that knowledge from Yajnavalkya. And then the Sanhita that he further wrote is called Taittariya Sanhita, Taittariya Aranyak, and so on. I hope I was able to answer that question. Somebody had a question. I asked you to hold off. Go ahead, please.
Yes. Yes, if I may ask you, thank you very much for a very informative session. This was this really helped me organize some organize some thoughts in my own brain. And my question is, are there any books that you can suggest we can read, or young children can read themselves, where and they need to be in English?
Yes,
Okay.
this book right here.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
That was my intent behind writing this book, is to provide the simplest possible information in very easy to understand fashion, not going into too many complex and deep details. So this the book that you see on the right side, that can be a good starting point. Of course, there are a lot of other books, but they go too deep, so it becomes confusing.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
right. And thank you very much. And I will look this up. Thank you again.
Thank you.
So thank you, Paragji, for the nice lecture. Very informative. This is Ganesh here. So I have a question, just kind of query in my mind. I mean, you would be the best person to clarify that. It is assumed that there are some apparent controversies within the Vedic verses, and in order to resolve them, Rishi Badarayana, he actually put in that those Brahma Sutras, and he actually, in those Brahma Sutras, he clarified, and he actually proved that those controversies, although they appear to be controversies, they are really not. I mean, is this what that Brahma Sutras were meant for? And could you just please a little bit tell us more about the Brahma Sutras? Thank you.
Yes, you're right. So the sutra, it means formulae, right? Sutras are formulae. So there are certain mechanics of certain activity, and that activity can be anything. That can be, some jyotisha, some yajna process, whatever. So those activities are documented in more clear format, in a sutra or a formula kind of form. Not everything is not like a formula the way we visualize or we imagine, but yes. So that kind of explanation is given in sutra texts, and Brahma Sutra is one of the texts like that. Yes, you're right.
Okay, thanks.
Parag, thank you very much. It is too eye-opening, and I think as somebody, I think Einstein or somebody said, the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know anything. So that's what state we are. I mean, at least I am in. At least we got some good glimpse of.
Before we conclude, I'll just mention one quick point, which is a common confusion, whether women are allowed to study Veda or not.
Okay.
Okay, and that is a very common confusion, common question. I was very surprised that nobody asked that question. Uh, so, in fact, when we say that Veds are revealed through rishis, and there are drashta rishis, some of those are rishikas also. The female rishi is called rishika. So there are female rishis who actually did reveal various mantras. So there is no restriction whatsoever about women studying anything. There are guidelines again on chanting though, because again, for the same reason, that if you chant something, it has effect on your body. And the female and the male body structures are different. So certain chanting can invoke certain vibrations or certain effects in a body which might not be safe for women at certain age, during certain period, or in general for a feminine body. So there are guidelines on what you chant, what you recite, but not what you study. You can study everything, but you should not chant everything. And that is the restriction for men also. You should not randomly chant something as a upasana. You can chant something as a part of your study, but you're not doing that upasana, because you're not then chanting with full force and multiple iterations and so on. So it really applies to both, but that is the real reason, not the discriminative reason.
माझा प्रश्न हा होता, मी जो विचारला तो, की why we have to read or study the Vedas. त्याचा रोख हा होता की what we are doing right now by this century or by this generation is from the Vedas. It is just in a different format and different language. Even if we see it, Jnaneshwari was written in a Marathi, but that Marathi was in a different dialect. So my point is, the way you just said, when it is said knowledge and not the written knowledge, when it gets said over and over for generations, it keeps changing the version. Is that why we are supposed to go back to the original? Is that what you are saying? That is my whole point, was why we have to learn the Vedas.
Right.
Is it like त्या गोष्टीचा अपभ्रंश झालाय का, असं मला म्हणायचंय.
Actually, if you ask for specifically अपभ्रंश ज्याला आपण म्हणतो, dilution किंवा that has happened a lot in Puranic texts more than Vedic texts.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay.
and there are a lot of areas where there was intentional dilution of Puranic texts to put down the value or put down the importance of Purana, or show how your Purans are useless, or they're talking about some absurd things. Fortunately, Vedic knowledge, to my knowledge, there is no alteration. There are interpretations, of course, but to the original text, there is no alteration, because everything is even today preserved through oral tradition. There are people who can chant the entire Rigved, for example.
पण एक गोष्ट, one thing I know for sure, that the Vedas are not the religious scripts, because they are talking about the science and medicine and the astrology. They don't say astronomy. So that I know. And dharma, the pure translation in English, is the way of life. It's not the religion, is the translation of the word dharma. Dharma's meaning in English is the way of life. And the way of life is Panchamahabhuta, Teen Shakti, Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh, creator, preserver, and destroyer. And that goes for each and every of those 5 elements. They all create, preserve, and destroy by themselves. They don't need each other. They, in each of one of them, they create, they preserve, and destroy. So that is a dharma. To me, I'm not imposing that. But that was my initial question, was why do we have to go back to the original scripts? Is it because there is a different version? म्हणजे आपण कानगोष्टी म्हणतो तसं झालं.
Right.
That's my point, was asking that question at this century.
Yeah. So again, as I said, to my knowledge, there is no such alteration in Vedic text. Dharma, the word dharma comes from root word dhru, dharayati. Dharayati is something that you hold or uphold, and something that in turn upholds you. That is the literal definition of dharma.
Correct.
You hold and what upholds you. But that also applies. The inherent nature is also called dharma, right? The life principles, the life value is called dharma.
Correct. Okay. Very nice. Very interesting concept. And the way you were showing the 4 parts of each Veda section, it seems like just a book. The beginning, which is the Anukramanika contents, and in the end, they give you the synopsis, what you learned from it in a brief. Isn't that what that is? 4 parts of that each Vedas?
Correct. So Sanhita is the core part.
Which is Anukramanika.
No, it is content. It is not Anukramanika. That is the core content. Sanhita is the core content. Brahman is applied elaboration. Aranyak is a contemplation. and Upanishad is more easy to
Of
understand.
Saransh.
Yeah, you can call it Saransh, you can call it more easy to understand kind of explanation in
Okay.
a dialogue format,
Okay.
question answer format.
ओके. पण छान, फारच छान होतं तुमचं प्रेझेंटेशन.
Thank you.
आय रिअली, इट वॉज व्हेरी इंटरेस्टिंग.
Thank you.
की
Appreciate it.
हो हो, फारच छान झालं.
And again,
थँक यू.
the last slide, my email address was there. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Usually I do answer most of emails. May not be immediately, but I do answer.
इंटरेस्टिंग होतं प्रेझेंटेशन, व्हेरी नाईस. म्हणजे
Thank you.
आम्हाला नवीन गोष्टी खूपच कळल्या, एवढं आम्हाला नव्हतं पहिल्या ह्याच्यातलं नॉलेज म्हटलं तर तसं काही नाही, पण इट वॉज इंटरेस्टिंग. कारण आमच्याकडे मागे एकदा गोडबोले शास्त्री म्हणून सातारचे आले होते आणि त्यांनी हे मंत्र तुम्ही जसे म्हणाला कसे म्हणायला पाहिजे ते सामवेद म्हणजे संगीत ह्याच्यात त्यांनी इतकं सुंदर म्हटलं. आणखी आम्ही म्हणजे त्यावेळेला टेप केलं होतं, कदाचित सापडेल ती टेप, पण इट्स लाईक अबाउट 30 years ago. कारण ती इथे गुरुमांच्या आश्रमात आले होते, यज्ञ त्यांचा मोठा इकडे केला होता, ते इंडियातनं ते मेन शास्त्री होते. तर ते आता तुम्ही सगळं बोलताना मला त्यांची खूप आठवण येत होती. आणि स्पेशली ते तुम्ही जसे मला संगीतामध्ये म्हटलेले, तर ते गायत्री वगैरे म्हणताना ओम भूर्भुवः स्वः आणि परत ते ओम भूर्भुवः स्वः आणि असे म्हणजे ते मागे पुढे अशाने खूप इंटरेस्टिंग होतं ते ऐकायला.
हे जे तुम्ही म्हणताय ना मागे पुढे शिकवण्याची आणि पठणाची पद्धत आहे.
हा, राईट.
पाठ, पदपाठ, घनपाठ असे ते पद्धती.
पण तेच ते म्हणजे ते त्याच्यामुळे ते इज इंटरेस्टिंग. आणि ते प्रत्येक वेळेला बोलताना सांगायचे की आपण सुरुवात केली त्यांनी ते की मी आता सरस्वतीला सांगितले माझ्या जिभेवर येऊन बस आणि माझ्याकडनं हे सगळे उच्चार, आणि खरंच ते ऐकताना असं वाटलं सरस्वती बसली. इट वॉज व्हेरी इंटरेस्टिंग. म्हणजे ते आता तुमचं पण ते ऐकल्यावर खूप छान वाटलं.
थँक्यू.
पण तुम्ही इथे असता का मग पुण्याला?
नाही, मी इथे पेन्सिल्व्हेनियामध्ये.
पेन्सिल्व्हेनियात आहेत. मग इथे तुम्ही क्लासेस घेता का?
क्लासेस असंच नाही, पण काही सोशल ॲक्टिव्हिटीजमध्ये लेक्चर्स सारखं चालू असतं. आणि इनफॅक्ट आत्ता मिलिंदजी तुम्ही जो प्रश्न विचारला आहे रामरक्षेबद्दल, पुढच्या आठवड्यात एक व्याख्यान किंवा प्रवचन आहे, ते इन पर्सन आहे. तर आणि तो आत्ता थोडा विषयांतर होईल, पण ते झाल्यानंतर त्याचं रेकॉर्डिंग मी मिळवून ते अपलोड करेन आणि मग विठ्ठल
कारण आपण नेहमी म्हणतो पण ते डीप त्याचा अर्थ काही काहीला कळत नाही, आणि तो कळल्यानंतर जास्ती इंटरेस्ट येतो त्या ह्याच्यात.
बरोबर.
इट विल बी नाईस. किंवा तुम्ही जर झूम वरती करणार असला तर आम्हाला ती लिंक पाठवली तरी आम्हाला ऐकायला आवडेल. ते
चालेल. ते झूमवर नाही, अनफॉर्च्युनेटली ते एका देवळामध्ये इन पर्सन इव्हेंट येतो, पण ते रेकॉर्ड करणार आहेत आणि आपण बघूयात.
या दॅट विल बी नाईस. पण थँक्यू व्हेरी मच.
तुम्ही आम्हाला झूम मध्ये ऐकवा मध्ये, आम्हाला खूप आवडेल.
राईट.
आपण विठ्ठलजींशी बोलूयात परत एक वाटलं
जरूर
घेऊ आणि त्याच्यामध्ये आपण डिस्कस करूयात.
जरूर.
डेफिनेटली.
छानच.
वैशालीताई, तुम्ही किंग ऑफ रशियामध्ये आहात. नाईस टू मीट यू. होपफुली आपण कधीतरी भेटू शकू इन पर्सन.
तुम्ही तिथेच आहात? किंग ऑफ रशियात आहात?
नाही, मी यार्डलीमध्ये आहे. किंग ऑफ रशियापासून 40 मिनिटं असेल.
राईट. यार्डली.
कोणत्या टेम्पल मध्ये रामरक्षाचं?
ते नॉर्थ जर्सीमध्ये लिनहर्ट्समध्ये विठ्ठल मंदिर आहे, तिथे आहे.
ओके. मला वाटलं किंग ऑफ रशियामध्ये आमची नणंद राहते आणि आम्ही आता तिथे 2 आठवड्यात येतोच आहोत लग्नासाठी.
अच्छा.
आणि यार्डलीला म्हणजे आता बरेच दिवसात मी त्याच्याशी बोलले नाही, पण माझा मानलेला गुजरात एक भाऊ आहे, तो डेंटिस्ट आहे तिथे खरा, डॉक्टर भोरा म्हणून.
अच्छा, नाही माहिती.
पण तो म्हणजे माझ्या बरोबर कॉलेजला होता, त्यांनी डेंटिस्ट हे करून तो माझं लग्न झालं लगेचच त्याचं पण लग्न होऊन तो इथे आला. म्हणजे इट्स लाईक तो आता लास्ट 50 वर्ष तरी तो तिथेच आहे यार्डलीत.
अच्छा.
इट विल बी नाईस. बघूया, म्हणजे जमलं तर कधीतरी तुमचं तिकडे आम्हाला येऊन ऐकायला मिळेल.
कधीही सांगा.
पण छान झालं.
Thank you. I'm glad you all enjoyed, and I'm glad I was able to give you some useful information.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Parag. Chan, nice.
LJ, thank you, Shri Kaka.
Right.
Very
Thank you,
informative.
Parag ji.
Thank you.
Somehow after all this, I felt like, okay, we should start learning Veda from scratch.
रिअली खरंच वाटायला लागतं तसे. यू फील लाईक दॅट. पण आता म्हणजे काय, समटाइम्स लाईक आय मिस लाईक टू लर्न, बट आफ्टर सर्टन एज ते सगळं डोक्यामध्ये खूप होतं. ते म्हणजे किती हे होईल, पण कोणी बोललं की अगेन रिकवर व्हायला लागतं काय शिकलं ते. पण इट इज चॅलेंजिंग टू लर्न एव्हरीथिंग नाव. But thank you. Yeah, hope to see you soon.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.
Kaka left, I think.
I think he left. Yes.
Okay, Parag, thank you very much. It was very informative. जसं मी म्हटलं की we don't know anything about it. That's what I know. I came to know. So.
Yeah, I don't know much. It is just a drop in the ocean, pretty much. What I know.
Yeah, true. Okay, then anybody, if doesn't have any question, then I think we can end.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks, Parag. See you soon now. We need to meet again and again. Okay.
Absolutely.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.